This should be the last part of your history. We stopped about half an hour in last time. I'm going to get you through the last of this outline. We're on section 13 of 13. It's the last page of your outline. We're up at paragraph 5. We're on the War for Terror, and I just want to continue right from here and go forward. So last time we were talking about the start of the war. We talked about the Twin Towers being knocked down. We talked about how difficult it is, surprisingly, to actually find the videos. What you're going to find often on the internet is, genuine information is usually hidden. It's buried. Powers that be don't want you to find that. They want you to find just the propaganda of the story they want to tell. That's not new in history. You talked about that a lot during the Russian Revolution with Germany, and on down the line goes. It's commonplace, but we see it happening here in our country for sure. And these videos are difficult to find, so make sure you can find the truth. All right, so we do the march up. Now, this sounds a lot like Desert Storm. The tactics are very similar, except this time, instead of doing the end-around sweep, we do a straight-up march along Highway 1, which is the Highway of Death, they call it. And I'll show you some pictures on that so you can kind of see it. Hang on, let me make sure I'm sharing my screen first. Go back here. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so these are some pictures. This is actually the Battle of Nasiriyah. This is one of the first battles we get into crossing the desert line. We come across again into Iraq. This time we come up in a giant armored column. Looks a lot like this, just columns of up armored vehicles, infantry assault vehicles, and tanks. Quite a few tanks, and we're not doing an end around move like last time. So this is a fairly common scene right here, that you will see on the march up when we're going in the second time. Mad Dog Mattis is leading the charge in this one, and we go up right into a town of Nasiriyah. And interesting, going into some of these towns now, and Nasiriyah was a border town near Kuwait. This was one of those interesting scenarios where the first time around, the Nasirians in the first war had actually backed us. But because we pulled out so quickly after the first war, Saddam Hussein went in and massacred them. So the second time in, they fought us, and they fought us quite heavily. They were actually kind of forced to fight us, but they did fight us, and they fought. They came at the tanks in human waves. There's not a whole lot of capability they had to defeat the M1 Abrams in this particular war, but they could hide amongst the cities and let the tanks generally pass and try to get our infantry from the rear. But from the guys that I knew that were operating the tanks going into Nasiriyah and even in Fallujah, they would do human wave attacks, and they would just attack them, and they'd mow them down with their machine guns by the hundreds and by the thousands. And so there were a lot of dead Nasirians, very few Marines. Actually, the heaviest casualties among the Marines were taken by friendly fire casualties when an A-10 rolled in on one of our units. But you can see, again, actually, a lot of this real estate right here looks very familiar. You get this third world real estate. Looks very familiar to the terrain that I recall fighting in. So I was in Fallujah later on. But this battle occurs. We have the rest of the march up. We actually do a very fast press this time. And we go basically straight up the highway of death. And let's see, I think I had some pictures that had the highway of death. You can see some of the vehicles enemy vehicles just destroyed all along the highway of death. Let's see. There are some of the back. No, that's not it. I don't know what that is. It's like a model. Hold on a second. Hang on a minute. See if I show you the highway of death. Well, maybe I can't. But there, you have to take my word for it for a minute. This is probably. Let's see. I just missed the maneuver piece. Yeah, there's Nasiriyah. You can see this is the maneuver sequence. This doesn't look right. These look like long designations of the units that were going around on Nasiriyah, because the units going in were Marine units. Okay. That being said, okay, so moving on past that, this time we go and we invade Baghdad. Now, remember I told you last time that the war in Operation Desert Storm had actually ended at 96 hours, right? So 4 days. And someone had asked, President Bush, the senior, then, why did we stop at 96 days and or 96 hours, 4 days? And his quote was, to have invaded Baghdad and occupied Iraq would have involved us in a bottomless quagmire from which there was no foreseeable withdrawal strategy. He was dead right. He was a prognosticator for sure. That was dead on. For whatever reason, his son took us into occupation, and we basically got into what amounted to nearly 20 years of occupation. Because once you go in, you attempt to occupy a nation, very hard to get out because you have to pacify the people. The longer you stay, the more the people become angry with you. They don't like to be occupied. Even if you're trying to do your best, they don't want occupiers there. And so your enemies grow, and your enemy hides among the population. We had a lot of insurgency from within, lots of hand grenades being thrown over walls, small arms fire, that sort of thing. The way we actually got out, we started to get out, and then we could have left, but we didn't. When I was there, they began to take and turn the tribal heads against each other. They would buy one tribe out against another, and in so doing, getting the backing of some of the tribes, they would support us for a while. And if we could have got out quickly enough, then we could have left Iraq. But the powers that be, the higher ups, wanted to keep us in Iraq to try to stabilize the country. But the bottom line takeaway for you is, if you're going to run against an insurgency, you have to provide yourself about 100 years to change the culture. Because if you don't change the culture, they're not going to accept an occupation force, and you're going to have a war that you can't get out of and you can't win. We saw it in Vietnam. We saw it in Iraq. We saw it in Afghanistan. There's just no way to hold ground like that without changing the culture. So generally speaking, if you're going to do a foreign war, you want to go in, fight, accomplish your objectives, and then the most important part is leave when you're done, is leave. And you see that we failed to do that. Okay. AQI, as we get ready to withdraw, AQI, Hamas, we see the rise of ISIS in 2014. In 2007, the House had passed a resolution to withdraw, but we did it so slowly. Obama kept us in there for a very long time. 2014, we attempt to withdraw from Iraq. We can't do it. ISIS then comes to power as we're pulling out of Iraq in 14. ISIS starts ramping up. And that is, I told you last time, that's the caliphate. That's you'll see this periodically. Then the Arabic nations won't come together on this, but the idea is that if they can unite all of Islam against the world, then that is a goal. Then they will. The caliphate is the ruling religious leaders in Islam. And every now and then, it was Iran said it at one point, Iraq said it. They say they have the caliph. The caliph has risen to power. They believe he's prophesized, and then he will come back to power. But again, they can't agree on from what lineage he's supposed to come from, right? Christians all believe Jesus comes from the lineage of David. In Islam, it's divided, whether it comes from the lineage of Muhammad or from his brother. And so they can't agree on a caliph. So that's gonna prevent Islam from uniting on those fronts. The Sunnis and the Shias will always be divided on that point. Finally, we were able to withdraw in 2017, and we're out. And basically, the end state is pretty much what it was before we left. So unfortunately, while we were able to go in, we were able to eventually find Saddam Hussein and kill him. We found Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan and killed him as well. We killed a lot of Al-Qaeda. I don't know how much we killed, if we killed enough of them. And then we finally withdrew, and basically those nations are pretty much back to where they started. So it's not really as though we accomplished anything, which is unfortunate. Although we did exact, the measure of justice upon those that did attack the towers, because we did kill a lot of Al-Qaeda operatives. That certainly happened. But as far as a long-standing goal, we were trying to stabilize Iraq. We were trying to stabilize Afghanistan. It didn't happen. And so now we're kind of back where we were. All right, let's move on to the last 2 points. Let's talk about globalists and the war on freedom. So what happens after this point, you have to understand, is there's another war that's also being fought simultaneously. Now, this isn't a war with rifles and guns. This is a war of propaganda and ideologies. This is the war that you are currently fighting now. It's been a long-standing war. It's nothing new, right? In terms of communism, which is, Satan's communism. Christ is freedom. You got the two sides of the coin. And so you're going to see these two different ends of the spectrum always fighting. They're always battling over which God do you serve, right? At the end of the day, do you serve the God of whatever government you put in place, or do you serve the Lord Jesus Christ? That's really the reality. Those who believe in communism and socialism look to the government to be their savior, and they look to them to run everything. If you're a Christian, you believe Christ has set you free, and you yourself as a private individual run your life. And so that's the major difference, right? So these are two diametrically opposed. Communism always ends in slavery because an oligarchy rises to power and suppresses communism. Capitalism is freedom, but as long as you can sustain it, as long as you are active, and all it takes is for good men to do nothing, is all it takes for freedom to die. It's for good men to do nothing. But as long as you can sustain it, then you can operate freely. You have all the blessings that come with that. But as communism rises, it attempts to bring capitalism in and enslave it. That's the war you are at here. Now, what does that war look like over the last? Let's just look over, let's say, the last 10 years, right? So let's begin with one of the major events of our time, which is the COVID-19 lockdowns. So if you go, I'm surprised, you go Google COVID-19 and you're going to see all kinds of leftist propaganda that COVID-19 was legit and that Donald Trump overreacted and that all of the conspiracy theorists are crazy. Now, a lot of the conspiracy theories that are out there are a little bit off the spectrum. The COVID-19 conspiracy theory is, however, accurate. It was started in a Wuhan lab in China. It was released on purpose. It was released to cause a lockdown during the election. And the purpose of that was to enable the mail-in ballots to be accepted widely, right? So if the mail-in ballots are accepted widely, then nobody's going to question mail-in ballots. And the mail-in ballot boxes were being stuffed to the hilt. There was no supervision on them. There was no way to find out who's actually submitting those ballots, if they're actually truly American citizens or they're made-up names. Then there's no trace from the envelope to the ballot. Once the ballot's released from it, you have no idea whether that's a ballot that was legitimately cast or illegitimately cast. There's lots of proof that was out there about ballot stuffing, but COVID-19 was one of the great ones. It was also a test. It was a test to see how far you can push the world. Across the world, most people accepted most of the COVID-19 lockdowns. They accepted the masks, which was unfortunate. Not everybody. I very, very rarely wore a mask. I would often go out in public without one. And as people looked at me, I'd smile and wave at them. And I'd always seek out the individual who didn't have a mask on and say, I'm very proud of you for not wearing a mask. The reasons for wearing a mask make no sense. It's not like you're wearing a mask that actually stops air molecules. It's a crazy little mask. But it was designed to see whether or not the American people would be compliant. And it was also designed to create fear during an election cycle. Later on, it was proven that COVID-19, well, a real virus, it really was a virus. Of course, COVID's been around for a long time. You can take a Lysol bottle from the 1970s and see that it kills the COVID, the COVID bacteria, the COVID virus, sorry. But the COVID-19 variant, of course, is different, and it was used for that purpose. And with the lockdowns then began. So let me show you some things that happened during lockdown. All of these things kind of come together. 2019, 2020 was just an awful. 2019 was awful. 2020 was awful for the elections going in all the way into 2021. That was a rough time. So let me just show you some of the things that happened. You guys remember probably a good amount of this, but you're fairly young, so you may not remember all of it. So let's. This is the Battle of Nasiriyah. The Battle of Fallujah, by the way, I just skipped over that. It was another one of the battles in the war there. Just some of this footage here is just, you can see as you look through this, this is just, it looks the same. It's all this third world country. This is what it looks like going through Fallujah. All of this looks very familiar. I probably walked past some of these very buildings. Right here, you can see, look how, anyhow, I'll skip all that. So we'll get to this. You have a few other things kick off. You have these BLM riots, Black Lives Matter. These are the left hires paid. You can rent a riot. These are guys who are really the criminals that come out and they stir up a local population. They were talking. The take was that the police were racist and were being unfair to blacks. Now, there's all kinds of good books you can read on this. A good one to read is Candace Owens' Blackout. That'll take you through the statistics and the facts and kind of just genuinely prove that that's not true, that the police are actually more patient with black criminals than they are with white criminals, but there is a disordinate number of blacks that actually commit crimes, and violent crimes, and that actually they just do it off of incidents that involve actual gunfire from a criminal, or a criminal fires a gun. And you'll see that there's disordinate numbers. But anyway, they create a race riot that doesn't really exist, or a race problem that doesn't exist at the time, and they fuel it, and they create these riots called Black Lives Matter. Now, there's a couple of incidents. There's a George Floyd incident where there was George Floyd was a criminal who refused to cooperate with police. They held him down on the ground, and he said he couldn't breathe. Whether he could or couldn't, don't know. But eventually he couldn't breathe. And if I remember correctly, he died. And so the accusation is that the police killed him because they had his handcuffs on or too tight. I don't remember it 100%. And that was the accusation. So this is a Black Lives Matter riot, right? These are riots. They're burning stuff. They're burning stuff down. These things go way over the top. Here in Louisville, they had to eventually call out the National Guard, because we had the Breonna Taylor riots. There was a couple others. There was one in Seattle called the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. This is several blocks of the city that were locked down and were taken over by gangs, claiming to be done for the sake of race, preventing police violence. But these gangs would come in and they would terrorize the local shop owners and extort them and require money out of them. They'd require the local women to have sex with them and these sorts of things. And yet the left totally supported these, and you'll hear them say great things about Chaz. It's an awful situation. And the Seattle governor refused to do anything about it. President Trump was going to enforce the shutdown of this Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. The governor there in Seattle, Washington, wanted to stop it. Eventually, they did. They sent in the police and they shut this place down. But these were the kinds of disasters that were going on. There was a lot of shaming that was trying to happen, that they would try to shame people into believing that if you were white, you're a racist. There's a book out there called White Fragility, tries to explain how if you're white, you are a racist by definition. Which, first of all, that's not true. Second, to even state that is a racist comment. So that person is, I forget her name. She's a racist by saying that if you're white, you're racist. That's saying that judging people by the color of their skin on either side of that coin is racism. This was the tension. This is a massive tension. You can see the backlash of this today. A lot of it was defeated. But in the conjunction with this, the other thing that happened is you got into this gave way to make the situation ripe for ballot stuffing and ballot harvesting. And let me walk you through some of this. So let me get you out of the BLM riots. By the way, here in Louisville, a couple of things that did happen. We had some of the BLM gangs would stop cars, passenger cars, and attempt to pull the passengers out. That actually happened to my daughter Reagan. They attempted to pull her out. A couple times cars would flee away from them. They'd shoot at them. So it was pretty dangerous here, or even in this city around 2019 and 2020. But let's go into what this does. Is it gives the opportunity for ballot stuffing. Here's an example of one of them that was caught on tape. And by the way, if you go to Google this is hard to find. These videos have been buried. If you go to Google anything about election fraud, it's going to tell you that it's all been debunked and it's a bunch of nonsense. It's not true at all. That is propaganda. It's a lot of propaganda that's being spread. You need to move past this. You need to make sure you can defeat this. But this was one in Georgia where at the end of the night, this was a ballot poll in Atlanta. They were counting the ballots at the end of the evening, and as they were counting the ballots, they dismissed most of the poll watchers, and then a handful remained behind, and they pulled out suitcases, or actually cases full of they weren't suitcases, but they were cases full of ballots, and began running them through the machines. And at one point, they're running the same ballots over and over again. That's not how elections are supposed to be done. So it's clearly fraud. It was caught on tape. The left has tried to come up with all kinds of excuses why it should have been valid, but it's not. This is not how it's supposed to be run. So let me just show it to you. You can watch this thing. Let's see if I can bring this in. Okay. I don't think the volume will come through, so I'll read it. You see over here, watch this table that's being encircled in the red highlighted area. Okay, you're going to see that these are ballot watchers. That's Rudy Giuliani that's presenting this as evidence. He's the former mayor of New York. Whoops, press the button. Hold on a second. Let me go back. This thing right here. There it is. Okay, you can see there they are. They're walking around on the floor. Now they're going to come over here and watch. He's going to reach under a table and he's going to start grabbing out some cases full of ballots to start processing those ballots, which is entirely illegal. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed it. Yeah, here he goes. Yeah, he's going to reach under there. He grabs a case full of ballots that shouldn't be there, that was pre-positioned, and they're going to go ahead and stuff these things over and over again. And this sort of thing happens. They don't have to win all of the cities. They don't have to show ballot stuffing in all of the cities, but they show it. They only have to do it in a handful of cities to rig the election, right? So what happens is if you get because of the way that our elections are run on general tickets, all you have to do is win certain key battleground states, right? So there's a certain number of states that are going to go Democratic because the way those states control their votes, and a lot of them are, are controlled by voting machines. Ours, we had let me back up one. In 2019, we had our elections the year prior to the 2020 election in Kentucky. They tested the Dominion voting machines here, and that was basically changes the votes. It just tabulates them and reverses them. I've got a couple of snapshots I kept on my phone where they were actually running ticker tapes at night showing the votes being cast from one, for like Biden and Trump. And in one instance, you see Biden go forward like 12,000, it's some specific number, like 12,193 votes. And in the same instant, Trump goes backwards the exact same number. They caught it live because they slowed it down on ticker tape. They had it. I've seen the video. I've seen the picture evidence. It was broadcast over, I think it was CNN that they actually caught it off of. And so the tabulating machines were just simply taking votes away from the Republican candidates and giving it to the Democratic candidates. It's easy to hack a machine. These are, when you allow machines to count your votes, well, you can hack them. I mean, that's how it is. I'm not a hacker. I don't know about that, but that's why a lot of the states after the 2020 election, when Trump pointed out the fraud, there's a movie out there called 2000 Mules, shows you how they stuffed these these mail-in votes, how all that occurred. Great movie, worth watching. They geofenced cell phones and whatnot. And you can see what happens. But after that, many of the states for the 2024 election changed their voting strategies, particularly here in Kentucky. They didn't use a lot of machines. They used older machines, and they used different softwares and different ways to tabulate votes and count for people. They scrutinize more closely the mail-in votes, but they still haven't scrutinized them enough. That's something we got to keep a close eye on. But this is the war. This is the war that's going on. The war is going to actually get beyond this. So we're going to move past this in a minute. Trump, during the interim years, exposes the swamp. You have to understand that we have such a large government with such excessive government spending. It's so far out of control. I don't know if we can walk it back off the line. Trump, Elon Musk, these kind of guys are doing their best to try to stop that. I don't know that they can. I mean, the corruption goes so deep. There's so many senators and so many congressmen and so many administrators that are hip deep in this, even down to the state level. For me personally, it's hard for me to think that the country as a whole is going to pull out of that. But I do have some confidence in the state of Kentucky, Commonwealth of Kentucky. We're extremely conservative and we're sensitive to that. But this is the war you're going to grow up in. This is a different type of war. Right now, it's a propaganda war. But let me take you one more step further. There's other things they're doing, right? It's data harvesting. You see all these data collecting that we're moving away from. We're going to a cashless society. How few people now use cash? Most people are using credit cards. Most people aren't even using credit cards anymore. They're using their phones with pay apps to pay for things. And as those become more common, it's going to become a lot easier to lock down somebody's spending. So as people do things that they don't want them to do, they'll simply lock down their spending. We saw that happen a couple times, even during 2020, during the riots, during that whole election cycle up in Canada. The Canadians locked down a bunch of truckers that they didn't want to that had private funding. They didn't want them to have funding, so they just simply locked down their funding. It was not a GoFundMe. It was one of those that they had give set. Yeah, it was GoFundMe, and they shut it down. So being able to control the money flow is very significant. They can go beyond that now. They can control the money flow. They can track you. They can track your spending. Obviously, we carry our phones with us everywhere. So on our phones, they know where we are. They know our spending habits. These are going to be weaponized and used against you. This is what the next war looks like. It begins as an information war. And that's what you have to be prepared for is how do we protect our information? How do we protect ourselves from this? How do we counter strike when these things happen? And this is homesteading is a big thing that's becoming more and more popular. So people aren't as dependent on public resources. They're a little bit more independent on private resources. So if these things happen, they can still eat, they can still provide water, they can still provide, solar power is a big advantage for that. So they can have some power. All of these different things are available to them, but this is part of the war. Again, it's a war of ideologies and it's a war of technologies before it becomes a war of weapons. Okay, so we all have all of this. Modern warfare, what does the next warfare look like? Well, I mean, that brings us up to today. Obviously, I skipped over just the America's not really at war at the moment, or at least not a physical war. Ours, again, is an ideological war. But as we see what warfare looks like on the battlefield today, the most modern battlefield at the moment is Ukraine and Russia. And we're seeing a lot of drones, right? We're seeing a lot of robots. Let me show you just some of it so you guys know what kind of things are out there so you're prepared for it, right? So let's look here. These are some of the drone strikes, some of the drone footage that's going on in Ukraine. You guys have probably seen this stuff, right? You can see these are vehicles going down the road that just a drone is nearby. It's being flown by somebody who has a computer nearby and can come in and destroy vehicles and convoys. And it's very difficult to defend against these things. They're small, they're fast, they can come in swarms. They've attacked them. They can attack in multiple sequences, or they can track and monitor for a while. Matter of fact, one of the better weapons on the modern battlefield now is the shotgun. Surprisingly, you want to get a good weapon for the future, buy a 12 gauge shotgun and get yourself some birdshot. So it's one of the ways that the Russian soldiers are defending themselves against these drones. They're also using a lot of netting, right? They're putting a lot of camouflage netting out there that they can hide behind layers of netting, because obviously the drones can't fly through that. But the drones could be patient. They can wait for you to come out. So this is a wicked form of warfare. It's really tough to defeat. So you have this superpower, Russia, that finds itself, at the mercy of these relatively inexpensive drones. And let's see what's happening here. It looks like this is a tank retriever with a tank, and they hit the tank retriever, and now. And now they just lost a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, and that drone was probably not more than a couple $1,000s for a nice drone, and the ordnance on it was probably not more than $3,000 or $4,000, and they destroyed a very high-tech piece of equipment. Makes it very difficult to defeat. We used drones a lot when I was in Iraq, but not to the level that they're using them here, because they can be operated by individual operators on the ground. You're going to be facing that. That's not the only weapon you're going to see on the battlefield. Let me show you another weapon you're going to have to face, and this is going to be a tough one. But this isn't weaponized yet. This is one of the robots that's out there. This is Tesla's. This is a nice robot, actually. But I want you to see, these are the robots that are coming out. This is a Tesla robot, right? Look what this thing's capable of. And it's still in its not early prototype phases, but it's still got a lot of development yet to go. In the next 10 years, these things are going to become very powerful devices. They're talking about making them as inexpensive as $20,000 or $25,000, which is less than the purchase of a new automobile. and it has a lot of capability. I mean, in fact, China has one that's called I think it's called the Thor, or the Iron. But you can look at this. This thing's walking around, right? The version's 2, the version's 3. They're making upgrades on these things. I've seen China's versions of these, and these are going to become effective weapons. Now, they don't necessarily have to have the human ones, the human-looking ones. The robots that they can use don't have to look human at all. They could look very human. So a lot of the stuff that we used to laugh and joke about is just being science fiction and not really realistic. Things like, Terminator and those kinds of things, those kind of movies, we always thought was not feasible, but it's becoming more and more feasible that you may end up in a war. I mean, heck, the Clone Wars, you can read that. I don't know if you can watch that movie with in Star Wars, that there'll be, there may come a time when you have entire armies of robots, and this is maybe not be very distant. You can see this one's particularly still struggling, trying to get up a hill, but that'll improve. So this is something else you're going to have to face. Not only are you going to have to face drones, you're going to have to face robots. What does it look like when we have a war that's fought with drones and robots? What does that look like, right? I don't know. This is something that's SOCOM, space community. I talk about some of these things. But how do you fight drones and robots? Well, I mean, there's right now they're not super effective. At least not the robots. The drones are pretty effective, but they're still not as effective as they will become. One thing that's very important to remember in these warfares, right, is that for drones in particular to be used, you have to pattern yourself. It's just like snipers. If a sniper's gonna be effective, he's got to know where you're going to be and when you're going to be there, and then he can be very effective against you. But if you're constantly moving, you're in the offense and you're unpredictable, well, it's very difficult for them to bring technology to bear. Now, as the technology gets better and better, and they got cameras throughout cities and whatnot, it's more difficult to evade some of that technology. What is this going to look like for the next war? No idea. But I think that's some of the things that we have to take into account. This will be a good discussion. Unfortunately, we're not doing this class live. This would be a good one to ask yourself, what does the next war look like? And as we've seen in a pattern in our class, right, we as a world, not just our country, but every country seems to fight one war behind. Our technology is one war behind, right? We're prepared right now to fight the last war. We're prepared to fight a war like we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. We'd be great at it, except that's not the war, right? That's what Russia is trying to do right now. Russia's trying to do that in the Ukraine. They're fighting very much like what we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're bringing heavy weapons. They're even bringing some fairly fast maneuver, but these modern weapons have changed the face of the battlefield. And so we have to be predictably changing ahead of it. And as you guys are, you're the next generation to go into the military and serve, what is that going to look like for you? Well, one thing is you're going to have to be tech savvy. And I realize that this tech could be a huge temptation, all kinds of bad things you can get into it. But there's also a lot of important things you get into. You need to understand the tech. Yes, it would be great if you know how to hack it. I used to train with a group of guys. I didn't train with them, but we had a group of guys in the Civil Air Patrol that would train black hats versus white hats, how to hack and counter hack and all that, and learning those skill sets. They're well beyond me. I call myself and my generation digital immigrants. You guys are digital natives. You grew up with this stuff. So part of it is understanding how the technology works and how to be able to get into it and manipulate. And when I was in college, I learned to write program in Fortran, a language nobody uses anymore, but at least I understand code and the concept of code. You may need to get to where you can understand code and how to get inside of some of these things to protect or hack or whatever you need to do in the next level of warfare that you're fighting. Often, we used to say this in Iraq is, how do you deal with when you have an IED threat, an IED improvised explosive devices, when a terrorist cell is planting a bunch of bombs and blowing them up on you? How do you defeat an IED threat? Well, our solution was you put a bullet in the head of the IED maker. So you can't, trying to get, it's called being left of bang, right? Trying to go after the terrorist cell after a detonation is really hard because they've already done their escape. You want to get to them before they make the planting. So you use human intelligence to go after the bomb maker. And if you can find the bomb maker and kill him, well, they can't make any IEDs. That's kind of the goal. The same thing would happen in this kind of warfare. If you're Russia and you're trying to defeat Ukrainian drones, don't try to defeat the drones. That's too hard to do. You need to go find the guys who are controlling the drones. Go find them, find where their headquarters are, where their power nodes are, destroy those things, kill those people, and you can shut down the drones. Um, to use a crazy analogy, I mean, look at Star Wars, right? Star Wars was episode 1 with Anakin Skywalker. He's fighting the droid army. He can't defeat the droids, but if he destroys the control ship, all the droids shut down. Similar concepts. I'm sure it's a distributed net, a lot of fun things to hit, things that you need to be thinking of as you get ready to go into the next level of warfare. They're still going to be kinetic, they're still going to be rifle on rifle, because even when you take out those drones, you still have an army. You still have, look at how our nation is organized now. This gets me into SOCOM, Special Operations Command. It's a little bit of a scary reorganization of how the military's been reorganized. They've taken all of the elite forces and put them under a single command. They used to be, the Marine Corps had its force reconnaissance, the Navy had the Navy SEALs, the Army had their Green Berets. All these guys were in separate, they were under separate commands in different branches, departments, of the military. Now they're generally controlled by a single general over the top of SOCOM. It's a lot of authority with very specialized forces. And it makes it easy to, unfortunately, to abuse them and send them out on missions they shouldn't be going on and get us, something to be aware of. You got to deal with SOCOM and droids, and you have to be aware of the fact that they're also drones. Now, we'll use that effectively as long as they're under the command of good guys. It's a very effective tool. Very effective tool. If you got a good president, you get, free-loving Americans, capitalists that are in control of our country. It's very effective. If our country falls in the hands of these communists and this ideology war that we're going through, and that force is turned against the American people, like so many things that have been weaponized against our own people. Our media was weaponized. Our food and drug industry is weaponized against us. It's all been weaponized. When we do that, if we weaponize our military against us, it's going to be difficult to defeat it because it's so versatile. So it's worth understanding how it works and how it functions. The good side, remember, this is the good side about what we do, particularly here in Elite Corps, is that we bring the gospel in from the ground up. So part of our job is to change the culture of the military from within, right? And so as we have, Christians that are in the military that understand their moral responsibility before God, they're not going to be like German soldiers in 1938 and 1940s that were putting Jews in the gas chambers, because they'll have a moral conscience and they will say no when they're told to do something wrong. I know quite a few of these men. Now, there's also quite a few that are not that way. There's a lot, unfortunately, quite a few Americans out there that will follow any order they're given. And that's a little fearful thing. So your job is very important. Right now, we want to win this war of ideology, so we don't have to win a war of rifles. This is where our class ends. It has been a pleasure going through this with you. Hopefully, you got a lot out of this. We can have another discussion offline later on about future warfare, what's going to look like. It's a good conversation. Just some reminders for homework, right? If you've made it to this point in the video and you've seen them all, then you have completed American military history credit, because you'll have gotten enough out of that between that and the homeworks that you did. If you want to get your Bible credit, you need to do a morality of warfare paper with all of your Bible sources, and you'll have to submit that several times and get it. We're going to work our way through it. So you can do it however long you want. It could take you 2 years to get that paper in if you want the credit. I recommend you do it before school starts. Get it in, give me a couple drafts. I'll kick it back to you 3 or 4 times till you get it right. Once you get it right, you can have that credit. If you want the English credit, then you need to do the second paper, which is your topical paper, which most of you have picked. You have that. Again, submit that. That'll get you the English credit. Remember to use the outlines that we've talked about, right? We talked about the 5-paragraph outlines and how we sequence those together and make them into papers. If you have any questions on those, feel free to give me a call. Guys, it's been a great pleasure teaching this class. I'm going to hang these videos up on the Elite Corps website, so if somebody else misses it in the future, they can catch it. Let's close in prayer, and then we'll finish this one. Father God, we thank you so much for the privilege to serve you in your kingdom day and every day. Father, I pray for these cadets who complete this class, Father, that you will imbue them with your spirit, Lord. Let them engage in this war of ideologies, Father, and free all the souls that they can, Father. May they speak the truth. May they defend righteousness, Father. May they defend your gospel, and may they defend American truth against the lies that are brought up against it. Father, I pray that you will bless them and bless the labor of their hands, Father. Protect them from the evil one, Lord, and guide them as they go, Lord, into their day and into their week. We ask all of these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, who we know lives and reigns forever on high. And amen. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Semper Fi. Let's see here if I can get into here and stop this recording.